Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. KSVY, really, it's been amazing.
It's been our pleasure. Tonight, Senator Dodd features a distinguished panel who will be discussing yesterday's election and what lies ahead from a local, state, and national perspective. I am Rick Wynn. I'm one of the volunteer hosts here on KSVY 91.3 Sonoma in FM in Sonoma. This evening's town hall is being presented on multiple platforms, including Senator Dodd's Facebook page, facebook.com/sendbilldodd, sd03.senate.gov.ca, Comcast TV channel 27 in the Sonoma Valley, if you want to see what we all look like, sonomatv.org, and the Sonoma TV channel on YouTube. For audio only, tune in as you may be already on KSVY 91.3 FM, or stream us at ksvy.org, or ask for KSVY on your home smart device. Again, tonight, this afternoon, we're discussing yesterday's election and what lies ahead from a local, state, and national perspective. Senator Dodd and the panelists will take your questions beginning around 4:30. The studio call-in number is 707-933-9133. That's 707-933-9133. We also have questions that have been previously submitted by email, and we will make every attempt to get those that are not addressed in the panelists' opening remarks and subsequent discussion. Senator Dodd, at least for another few days, represents all or part of 6 North Bay counties, including Napa, Sonoma, Solano, Contra Costa, Sacramento, and Yolo counties. And now I'd like to turn it over for the final time to Senator Dodd, who will make his opening remarks and introduce today's panel. Senator.
Thank you, Rick, and thanks to our panelists and KSVY for convening this latest in a series of town halls. As you indicated, this is our 26th and last virtual town hall that we started in 2020. Tonight, we'll discuss lessons from the last 10 years, the effects of yesterday's elections, and what's on the legislative horizon for 2025. After, we will open the floor for your general questions, and I'm very glad to be joined by this distinguished group. And thanks to the hundreds, no, thousands, maybe even millions of people tuning in tonight. Later in the town hall, we'll be reading your emailed questions. We will start taking your calls at 4:30, as Rick said. Once again, that number is 707-933-9133. I want to start by saying thanks to everyone who voted in the election yesterday. Your participation in the democratic process ensures we can continue the American tradition of fair representation for everyone and the peaceful transition of power. While I know many are really disappointed with the national results, myself included, but we'll move forward here in California to build prosperity. Before we get into the details, I'll mention the obvious. I wasn't on the ballot this time around. So I'm leaving elected office after 25 years of public service, including the last 10 years in the legislature. I was term limited from seeking another term in the Senate. It's been the greatest honor of my professional life, representing the people of California in District 3. Although there's still much to achieve, I think we got a lot done. You elected me to help, and I did my best. And I'm happy to say that I wrote 126 new laws during my tenure that were all signed by the governor of the state of California. From dozens of bills to protect communities from wildfires, to consumer protection, education, housing, and water management. And I tried to take on issues that will build a better California now and for future generations to come. Of course, everyone loves to bring up my bill allowing cocktails to go. That was a hit during COVID. But I'm especially proud of the SB 901, which dedicated over $1 billion to wildfire prevention, something we hadn't even seen in the thousands of dollars before that. And my SB 478 banning hidden fees. I'm looking forward to spending more time with my wife, Mary, our 5 kids and their spouses, and our 13 grandchildren. But I'm not going to retire. I expect to continue public service through appointed office on a part-time basis and work to support our communities in other ways. Now I'm passing the torch to a new senator who I am absolutely convinced will offer the same dedication and passion for public service. And I'm leaving you in the hands of seasoned colleagues who have proven themselves as true leaders and will be staying on in the Senate. Here tonight are two of those people to talk about what's ahead in 2025. The first one is Assembly Member Lori Wilson. She was elected in 2022 to represent California's 11th Assembly District, which includes all of Solano County and portions of Contra Costa and Sacramento counties. First elected to Suisun City Council in 2012, she served as vice mayor for 6 years before winning the mayor's seat in 2018. During her tenure, Lori demonstrated a track record of fiscal responsibility while leading efforts to bring more housing, jobs, and diversity to Suisun City. Senator-elect Christopher Gabaldon. Christopher was elected yesterday to replace me in the Senate. He has a long record of public service that includes more than 2 decades as West Sacramento mayor and gubernatorial appointments to the California Community College and state water boards. In 2015, President Obama appointed Christopher to serve on America's College Promise, chaired by the wife of the president, Dr. Jill Biden. Christopher is also on the Sacramento State University faculty. When he's sworn in on December 2nd, he'll be the first Filipino American to serve in the California State Senate. Also, we'll listen to a local expert on the results of the election. Dr. David McEwen is a chair of political science at Sonoma State University, where he's been on the faculty since 2003. He's an expert on American politics and international relationship and was a Fulbright scholar. Dr. McEwen is also a frequent political commentator and elections expert who appears on network news shows and contributes analysis to state and national publications. So I don't know if Assembly Member Wilson with us yet?
No. No.
Okay, so we're going to start with Senator-elect Christopher Gabaldon. Christopher, it's just been fantastic getting to know you since you won in the primary, and I'm firmly convinced that this district is going to be well served by you. Take it on.
Well, Senator, thank you so much. I'm excited to be, like all of you. I'm on fumes at the moment from the election last night and hitting refresh over and over and over again. But it's really great to be with you. I want to say first, just we've been on the campaign for 20 months. I announced my candidacy in March of 2023, and you have to in a district like ours. You can't learn the district in 5 minutes. There's 22 cities and 6 counties and all untold number of small rural communities. And in every single nook and cranny and corner of the district, the fingerprints of Senator Bill Dodd are there. And they are there in the big picture on a lot of the issues that you just mentioned, Senator, on keeping costs down and fighting inflation through attacking the junk fees, and on the big issues of insurance and wildfire protection and so many others. But whether it's the Sosco Junction project or new buses or support for Firewise, that you cannot go anywhere in this district and not see the result of the tireless advocacy and the remarkable effectiveness that Senator Dodd has demonstrated fighting for the communities of the district. That's really what makes our district so special, is that it is all these places from Vallejo to Davis and West Sacramento to Napa to Sonoma and Rohnert Park and Cotati that are just trying to do good, do better, and hope that the state will help, and then the rest of the time get out of the way. And Senator Dodd, you've been really outstanding at that. And then also fighting to make sure that California's overall state policies advance our values, the values that we share in this district and throughout all the communities, but also work and are make sense. They're common sense, and they help us on the ground. So I just want to say thank you to Senator Dodd. It's been an inspiring campaign, and just to see the deserved belovedness that you enjoy in this district is really tremendous and inspiring, and very proud to have the opportunity to try to step into at least a little bit of your shoes along the way. I mean, look, that last night was tough. I mean, our district voted overwhelmingly, I think 2-1 on the side that didn't win in the national race, and what there are a lot of state ballot propositions and other races that folks have been actively involved in. We have one of the most engaged district. I think 1 out of every 3 people volunteers on a campaign or writes a check or knocks on doors or whatever. And so it can be tough, but I think it's all right today to be ecstatic and celebrating. It's just fine to be upset and anxious. It's fine to just want to turn it all off and to sleep for a little bit, or reconnect with your cat and just do nothing about politics for a little while. We all need to just take the moments that we're going to need. We're going to need to rest up and get tough again, because we have a lot of work to do, both because of the national election, because we got to get California at its best as well, not just for the national fight, but to really empower our community. So I'm really excited about taking on some of the issues, picking up the torch and the baton from Senator Dodd on wildfire safety and prevention, on insurance, on education and the environment and water, and a whole host of others as well as we're going. So I'm looking forward to the questions today, and I'm excited to be here with David. And thanks to KSVY and the participants and the viewers and the listeners for joining us for today's important conversation. Thanks so much. Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate that.
David, let's hear from you about the election and what do you think? What do you think happened? And you've been asked these questions for the last 48 or 72 hours. Kind of give us the high notes, so to speak.
Sure. Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to join you. I'm not just a Senator Dodd fan professionally. I'm a Senator Dodd fan personally. So this is bittersweet to be here with you all. I also think Senator-elect Christopher Cabaldon is going to knock it out of the park. And he's going to do a great job carrying on much of the work, Bill, that you've done and your staff has done. So it is an interesting district, an important district. And I want to kind of start at the top. Look, yesterday's results may be mixed and may have kicked many of us in the gut. I run a bunch of mathematical models about the vote and what that looks like, and we thought we'd see better turnout. And that's where I think we should start. If you look at states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Democrats have been struggling there off and on since about 2008. But those states have changed dramatically since 2012. And you look at the $1 billion spent over 107 days. That's a lot of money and a lot of resources. But we see some underperformance, as all of you know. There's a lot of emerging voter subsets. This, what I study, called the rising American electorate. These younger voters, 18 to 29, 18 to 34, the future of our democracy, hugely important. These are not just like the Swifties and the Beehive. It's much more than that, because these are folks that are often conflicted about our politics. They're listening to podcasts. They're going to town hall events like this, but they're also opting often out of politics. If we look at some of those numbers, we see some important things. In the 18 to 29 demographic, that's a big kind of demographic to measure. And we know that an older voter subset is going to be there early and often. We know that Democrats are going to be siloed and living in certain areas. But going after, for example, the suburban vote, going after the rural vote, a really important demographic within this Senate district, for example. We saw some big differences. Joe Biden had a plus 25 difference for 18 to 29-year-olds in 2020. Kamala Harris on the exit polls only plus 13. And that underperformance is a big deal. Talking to our voters, Democratic voters, another big component. Filipino Americans, as the senator-elect knows, are an important power player, not just in Vallejo, but throughout different areas of Senate District 3. In addition, if you look at African-American male voters, Donald Trump got 27% based on the exit polls, and in 2020, he got 8%. That's a huge, huge change, a really big number. And 51% of white suburban women voted for Donald Trump. So these are all hugely important demographics that we need to look at and to consider and think about our messages to them, because our messages to them are not just about the politics of reproductive rights. They're also about the politics of the pocketbook, of what's happening for their future and whether they're looking forward or back. So in that sense, there are some challenges here, but I want to make sure that we're not downtrodden about what has happened, that there's some real opportunities moving forward, because also the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party in California is changing in important ways, and that's a manner to engage voters. We have a lot more office holders that are much more diverse backgrounds in California over the last 10 years, and that diversity, that richness provides some important opportunities throughout the country. So while we look at the data and extrapolate what's going on, we also see that there's some important opportunities that have been rising for Democrats, and that position headed into 2026 to 2028 after we kind of take a pause of the sobriety of the messages that were sent. And then a final note. We don't know the final disposition of many House races, and those House races that started in New York in terms of a change that may bring, for example, Hakeem Jeffries into the speakership, those Central Valley districts that we see, what's happening in Congressional District 13 or 22, what's happening in Southern California, even in a Republican district like Congressional District 41. There's a lot of things churning here. In terms of importance. So 2 years is a really short time frame to roll our sleeves up and get to work. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you. And again, I want to thank Senator Dodd and his staff for these 26 town halls, and also congratulate State Senator-elect Christopher Cabaldon, and look forward to working with you as well. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you, David. I don't see Lori on yet, so we'll get to her later. But I think it's appropriate we could take some questions. Of course, Christopher's coming in. You can talk about District 3 or anything you want in that regard. We can talk about history, what's happened in the past, or more importantly today, since we're one day, not even 1 day away from the election, less than 24 hours total. So, or you can talk to David and ask questions. So we're going to open up. Rick, why don't you take it from here?
I've got some questions that were submitted earlier, and one of the ones, since we were just getting off of the, dare I say, trauma of last night, a question for the panel is, how will California be affected by a Trump presidency going forward? David, you want to start with that?
Sure. I think there's some important counterpoints here. If we look at California and what's happening, we're going to find out very early how important our Central California's role is as the 5th largest economy for what's going on in tech, what's happening, for example, around crypto, all of these kind of important issues that kind of rose up right when the lame duck session happens in December. There's some important issues to visit around, for example, the government running out of funding on December 21st. And then we move forward to a place where the debt ceiling hits in January. All of this presents some opportunities for California political leaders to provide important leadership. That could be, for example, around Obamacare and what's going on in the healthcare field. That can be around tech and what's happening in terms of AI, an area that the senator has been interested in, and the senator-elect is also interested in. And then finally, what's happening in terms of housing and homelessness, and how California can provide some experimentation at the local level to deal with many of these issues. As we look at as well what's happening in the criminal justice area, the messages we get out of Proposition 36, or the recall of a DA in Alameda County or an Oakland mayor. We also know that the electorate is surly, looking for riddled with angst, and looking for solutions. So that's that practical guide forward that I think is also a place where many of California's leaders are looking to provide much more practical solutions, especially in the midst of a challenging budget situation.
Senator Dodd, your answer to that question, especially with regard to some of the tax policies of the Trump administration, previous Trump administration, were detrimental to California homeowners and et cetera. And of course, there's an animosity towards California leadership. How do you see the next several years?
Well, certainly I was there in 2020 when the president, now I guess elect, kind of went off a little bit during his term, is maybe more than a little bit. And what you're talking about is the salt taxes. It really disadvantaged for interest expense, write-offs, primarily in Democratic areas like California and New York. It hurt the worst. And, with tax breaks for only the ultra wealthy people. I guess what I hope, and I'm an eternal optimist. I've always been that way. I'd like to see this president start communications when he can. He's not going to do it anytime soon with our governor. I think we have to find a way. He's going to be our president for 4 years. Make no mistake about it. If there are things constitutionally that he's messing with, I know that Rob Bonta and Gavin Newsom are going to hold him accountable. But I would hope that what we can do is, in a number of different areas, he always talks about states' rights. The states should be determining what they do. We know that's the case in abortion. That's what he says there. I think in the areas of climate change and in the environment and water policy, he ought to let the state of California do what we do. Let's take the animosity out of this, but make no mistake, if he does not, he's going to be met with legal challenges that are that more than likely, in my view, will be just and something just protecting the values of the state of California and the really strong things we've done in these areas over the years.
Christopher, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of scenarios here, and the challenge I think for us as Californians, whether in the Senate or on the streets, is how to prepare for all of them at once. How to be pragmatic and practical and working, how to prepare for a fight, and then how to prepare for, in some sense, the worst. The worst being what was actually said during the campaign, which was, watch Elon Musk saying everybody's going to have to endure some pain. For one day, there's going to be a dictatorship. We're going to arrest all my enemies. Gavin Newsom's going, we're going to pick him up on the day after the election and arrest him. These are severe threats to the fabric of our institutions and our democracy. And I think, we learned after 2016 to take seriously. We benefited before by their inability, their lack of competence or preparedness to execute on their agenda. But their agenda, that's the whole point of Project 2025, was to lay out an actual workable agenda. And as Governor Walz said, you don't do that unless you're planning to do it. So it's not going to be a repeat of 2017, where we just we march in the street, file some lawsuits, and pass some model policies in California. That's not going to be the only solution here. So we have to be at least ready for a situation in which we're in a much more adversarial relationship where the institutions and the rule of law doesn't apply. At the same time, then there are some of the fundamental threats to California itself. So if we have the kinds of immigration and migrant raids that were described, like the impact just in our district on the wine industry and on agriculture, and therefore on food prices and everything else, in industries that are already struggling, could be a mortal blow. And so so we've got to be ready to fight on those issues as well. And we've talked about some of the other ones as well. I think the one ray of hope here is the flip side of the lack of the worry that I have. I'm worried that we don't. Kevin McCarthy, remember, was the Speaker of the House when Trump was elected president. So California was at a disadvantage, but the Speaker was from here, and the House majority depended on a few House Republican seats. That's not the case anymore. California is much more villainized in that way. However, if the Republicans do get control, it will be because they won at least a few of these key Republican seats, and we'll have to hope and work on those House Republicans to at least try to be a buttress on the worst of everything. And if the Democrats win, it will be because of California as well. So California's leverage in some sense is that we are now a House swing state. That might be the only protection that we have, and we have to play that card that we never had before, but maybe the only one left in the deck for us, but it's an important one.
Christopher, I'm glad you said, you corrected me there. I was there in 2016. I think I inadvertently said 2020. So appreciate that. Go ahead, Rick.
Again, our phone number is 707-933-9133, 707-933-9133. If you want to chime in with a question. David McCune, I'd like to have you chime in on the previous question, if you would.
Yeah, I think that what you're going to see is leadership in California that is going to step up, particularly, I think, in that area of climate change, and in one area that there is a commonality, especially with Trump's new home state of Florida, and that's related to the insurance market. If we look at the FAIR Plan, we look at the challenges for insurance in California, we're going to have some interaction with the federal government with what that looks like. If there's going to be some type of experimentation or some type of policy making that can occur, that might be a place to find common ground that both helps the insurance industry, helps that business, and at the same time provides some level of consumer identity and protection that extends beyond the FAIR Plan. That's a tough issue. It's a very complicated issue, and it's an issue that's often been left to states. But you see states like North Carolina or Florida, two important states for the Trump coalition, as a matter of fact, and one is a swing state. But at the same time, you see states like California and even Arizona, Oregon, other states that are facing similar problems or challenges around insurance. So I think looking at things that are proactive and practical and less confrontational while preparing for the confrontational is an important element. I think that also blends the past senator, state senator of this district and the future senator of this district in terms of preparing for that inevitable conflict, picking those fights, but at the same time also finding places where we can advance at least incrementally some solutions that could be helpful, especially for not just Californians, but all Americans.
Senator Dodd, I know you tried to do everything in your term, but there are some issues that are probably still left. I'm going to start with you as to what remain the most important issues in California that need to be addressed over the next several years.
Well, certainly insurance is one of them. This insurance problem that we have in the state of California, the legislature's acted, the governor and the insurance commissioner are in the process of finishing up a rulemaking. I think those are going to be really highlights moving forward. I think that our fuels management that we've done in the state of California, the fact that we've got a new Cal Fire Air Force totaling, I think, 68 planes or helicopters, including night vision helicopters, is also helping to attack these fires quickly. But at the end of the day, the insurance market's not going to come back until we have insurance companies ready to come into the market to compete. So where they can make money, that's what it's about. These are all businesses that have investments, and when they can park their money in financial institutions, bonds, and the like, and make more money than they can by covering perils, we're not gonna see anything very quickly. But I have confidence that next year, probably by this time, I think it will be better. The FAIR Plan is also something that is driving a lot of this. I think it's just too much detail and too much in the weeds to get into on this program. I think, Christopher, you could have one just on insurance, sometime the first of the year. I hope you'll take this on. You certainly don't have to, but I think you'd be amazing at it. And I think it really helps the people of the district. So that's front and center of my mind. Certainly water is a big issue, and housing, homelessness. These are issues that are not going away anytime soon.
Thank you, Senator. Christopher, I do encourage you to take that advice.
You bet. Although I should say that, Senator Dodd still has 3.5 weeks to solve all these
okay. Okay, but we're not going to have.
And he has been, one of the key leaders on this issue in the Senate. And so I know how hard he's worked in order to get to this point where we're at least starting to turn it around. But I think David, I could not agree with David more on this, which is the potential. We're going to need a national approach or multi-state approach or what have you. But this is a problem in many, many states, some of which don't have California's regulations and all that. We are not the only. We're contributing to the problem, and Senator Dodd and the insurance commissioner and the governor are working to fix that part of it. But once we fix that, that doesn't mean the problem is solved. It just means we haven't made it worse. But where I think David is exactly right is that this so far isn't one, insurance is one of those very few issues that doesn't immediately trigger the part of your brain about which party you're in or who you like for president. Like, because in reality, nobody has great answers. Nobody so far said, I know exactly what we should do. Here's what it is. It's simple and all of that. So I think you're right, David. This is an opportunity for us to find something that's extraordinarily important. That's pushing people out of their homes, out of their futures, and it's doing it without regard to red and blue states. And it is an open field for solutions that maybe can give us the chance to work together and partner both across the aisle and across the state and federal divide too.
Gentlemen, we have our first caller, Elizabeth from Benicia. She wants to talk about executive orders. Elizabeth, you're on.
There were so many frightening things spoken of about mass deportation and pulling out of NATO and whatever. And I am wondering how much of that can be done purely by executive order, and at what point things need to be approved, confirmed by the legislature, by the Senate and the House of Representatives. I sounds as if the Senate is going to be on the side of Mr. Trump, but I guess there's still some hope for the House. So what can he do just by executive order?
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think we'll toss that to David. And Elizabeth, can you take your answer over the air, please? Thank you.
Okay.
Elizabeth, thank you for the question. I think it's a hugely important one because there's executive authority for the president has been expanded. It continues to be expanded. And Donald Trump tested the limits of this in his first term. If you look at Project 2025, if you look at the plans or the ideas that they may want to disavow, there's a lot of extension of what they are talking about that can be done through executive order or what are called as well signing statements. Signing statements can be attached to legislation or not. The one thing I would pay attention to is the degree to which, if you own the Senate, which has a lot of purview on appointments, the presidential prerogative is generally such that he gets to appoint folks that we may not like, and they get to serve. And I'll use an example. That might be RFK Jr. In charge of HHS or vaccines. That's going to present some real confrontation with California and what we've done here in California around Obamacare. Around reproductive rights, around education, public schools, and what's happening with kids and their public health. So if these items cannot be accomplished through legislation, or if Republicans can't agree themselves, because it's a quite fractious set of different freedom caucuses for the Republicans, if Mike Johnson can't corral those cats, for example, in the House, if the Senate leader can't do the same, then they'll use executive orders in a deep, deep way. And I think one area where that could also be important is on education, on transgender rights, on picking on people, which I think the senator-elect was polite about not saying, but the picking on people and the demonization of individuals is a component of their usual modus operandi. I don't want to start out negatively before he's even been sworn in, but that is an area where they can provide wide-ranging guidance, especially to states, and that could become really important to our friends and fellow citizens and our fellow inhabitants of states like Texas, South Carolina, and so on. So it is a scary time, Elizabeth. There's no doubt about that. And the president has pretty expansive powers under executive orders. And I think the president-elect is going to test those boundaries as well.
So we can see yet another assault on Obamacare, which there's no solution, just assault.
I would think there would be if RFK Jr. Were given those marching orders as HHS secretary. That's going to affect not just the most vulnerable amongst us. It's going to affect children, I think, in schools, in public schools. It's going to affect reproductive rights access. It's going to influence wraparound care to deal with the homeless crisis in California and in other states. And so you're going to push that off, particularly to blue states, which may be more problematic, more challenging, because things happen here. And what I mean by that is the level and the volume and what's going on in blue states is generally much deeper and bigger and broader than what we see in many red states. I do think there are a lot of opportunities for Democrats in those blue states to be inventive and creative about looking for solutions around these things. So I don't think all hope is lost, even given the expansive power of executive orders.
Fingers crossed. Christopher Calderon, do you, Calderon, do you have any legislative items in your back pocket that you're going to whip out on day one and try to get on the floor?
Well, we're actually meeting tomorrow about some follow-on wildfire legislation that Senator Dodd and some of his colleagues have taken on that we're working on. But yeah, we got a few. Although I will tell you, we are reevaluating in the light of last night. Where the key elements for how we can be responsive, not just to the federal government directly, but also, it's still early and we're all grappling. Reeling to some extent, but we also need to hear and listen and understand what happened. And I think some of David's analysis is really helpful in that regard. But elections are also important moments, even when you win, for humility. And so we should all be taking the time, going to podcasts like this and listening and talking to folks and trying to understand what folks are saying through all the noise. And so I'm committed to doing that as well. But we have proposals that we'll be doing on wildfire and on education. A lot of stuff in the district as well. Some major water issues throughout the district, including Solano County in particular. So a bunch of those, but also really looking for where these points of either confrontation or maybe trying to open a door on some of the federal questions that we've talked about today, because I think those are really important. And we're going to see, we're going to need a top to bottom analysis, even in state government, about the things that we do that we take for granted. Some of which we already know about. And probably the best example is, our ability to regulate a lot of issues with respect to vehicles is because the federal government, gives us that delegation of authority from the EPA to regulate air pollution and emissions. And that was a point of big contention in the last Trump administration. And that was restored to us, but that's the sort of area where we just assume we have this ability and authority to act. And it's sometimes, and the same thing is true on water issues and a lot of others, where we are at the mercy in our current toolbox of the federal government. That means, one, we have to fight to protect that toolbox, but also to, as David has said, start to innovate and create other ways of getting to the same solutions. And I would say, importantly, from the lessons from yesterday, is we have to be laser focused on creating and innovating solutions that will also address the pocketbook consequences. And I think we can. I know we can build more housing, fight climate change, build climate resilience, improve public education, and also not price everyone out of their groceries and their home and their long-term care and their home insurance. Or we have to do that. And I think so one of our top jobs, I think, in the Senate is going to be how to make sure that the big aspirational policies, the fights that we're having with the feds, that are always in the context of what does this mean for everyday Californians who are just trying to make ends meet.
Senator Dodd, do the feds hold purse strings that they can pull back from us if we don't cooperate in things that the Trump administration might want to do, such as rounding up aliens?
Well, that's certainly always a threat. During the last Trump administration, they tried that. I know Attorney General, it was probably Javier Becerra at the time, David, before AG Bonta got in.
AG Bonta, yeah.
And so, those are things that they can be fought. The other thing is some of this federal money, particularly the money that for climate that President Biden's put in. That's a worry certainly for us. There's a lot of money, available for California on high-speed rail and hydrogen and so many other things. Money that's already been directed and money to be directed, and it's always a worry that he might use that as an opportunity to kind of stick the needle into California a little bit.
David, do you have any comments on the way statewide ballot measures went?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So if you look at the ballot measure process, and let me just kind of focus first kind of locally. You see things like Measure T that passes in Sonoma, the city of Sonoma, overwhelmingly, right? It gets almost 60% of the vote, a really big deal. in terms of this transaction and use tax, simple majority. We're seeing this moving around and localities across California. One thing to pay attention to is as we hit that kind of state constitutional limit of 10% sales taxes in the county, there's going to be more pressure for localities to put things on the ballot to close the funding gaps at the local level as we head to 2026. That spills over to what happens in terms of regional measures. Your listeners and viewers might recall that Regional Measure 2 to deal with transportation in the Bay Area was pulled off the ballot, having some resistance. That's because voters are worried about their pocketbook. It's those economic issues that are going on again. And then when we look at the ballot measures that passed, we see a little bit of this kind of Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing going on, right? A ballot measure that has pretty clear title and summary on climate bond. Proposition 4 does really well. It starts out with a little bit higher kind of level of support. It's not at 50% as it starts out, but just by the nature of the topic, it's closer. It has a higher mark, and then clean title and summary adds a couple more points to that. But then you see things like Proposition 6 to outlaw slavery, which California voters go, no, we're not going to go to that place and related to prison labor. But then they do things like, they get rid of Proposition 8, finally, through Proposition 3, but then have some difficulties around bonds, but only in the sense of like for infrastructure. So we get this Jekyll and Hyde voter who goes back and forth, and we see 10 measures on the ballot, and the one that gets the most votes is the one that's at the bottom of the ballot on Proposition 36, to give you some idea of Californians picking and choosing what they're doing on the ballot, and also raising, if you will, some elements of differences that they have. They want good roads, they want good schools. This is the challenge for lawmakers, but they don't want to pay for those things. And maybe in the town of Sonoma they do, but in other places they don't. And I think you're going to see that kind of Jekyll and Hyde thing continue. It also makes it likely that the 2026 ballot, right, when more than half the legislature is termed out, different things are happening. We lose, great people like Senator Dodd under this term limits environment. It also places a lot of pressure on the ballot for ballot propositions in 2026. So I think that's an element to pay attention to. Your listeners and viewers might remember we voted on gaming in 26 and 27, the last ballot. We voted on kidney dialysis 3 times. So I guess there's at least progress that we didn't see it a 4th time.
Christopher, do you see any messages in the results of those statewide initiatives that you're going to take with you into the legislature?
Yeah, I think David's right. And the other thing, and David referenced the Sonoma local measure, but we had local measures in almost every town in our Senate district, and many throughout the state as well. And in each place, it was as though the community was reckoning with its own fiscal issues and thinking, well, we need to make some additional investments. But you got to see the signal too. Like if everyone feels like this at this exact moment, we all need to do a new local tax, that there's something that's breaking or eroding with our overall system of public finance and the way that cities and schools and counties are funded. Because it's much more than just one city just not getting its job done or whatever. It's everyone at the same time, and that's no big surprise. And I think it's also one of the issues that we're going to see potentially going in the wrong direction in the next couple of years. We saw the Supreme Court decision that said you couldn't charge developers as much for the cost of their projects, and we've seen more state policies that go to what's called by right housing, which basically says you don't have to get an agreement with the local government before you go and build. And that's good for a lot of reasons in building housing. It's not so good in terms of having somebody pay for the park and the road and the school and the other things that are associated with the new housing. And so I don't know what the answers are, but we are coming to a point where the way in which cities and counties are funded and their funding streams, and given the amount of growth that they are anticipating, is breaking. And you can kind of see that in the votes. I mean, not to overinterpret, but where the voters statewide were asked, do you want to spend money to do this thing right now? They pretty much said yes. Do you want to give us the ability to spend more later? And we'll come back and ask you again, but we want the ability to ask more later. And there, the voters, at least at the results as they are right now, weren't so sure. And so, they are, I think, probably rightly nervous about what the future of taxation and all this looks like. I will say one other thing, which is that some of this is it's a result of climate change, like insurance, the variability, the amount of times you got to repave a road. I mean, there's a lot of costs and other things are going up because of climate change. That should be no surprise. Many of us, most of us on this show have talked about this before, and so we knew that was coming, and here we are. But that doesn't make it any easier to grapple with because we never built a budget to allow for that. So I think voters were trying to send us a nuanced message. Like we're ready to invest, but we want to make sure we want to know exactly what it is, and please don't go crazy. And so here's a short leash for state government to make some critical investments in water and climate and come back to us and ask for the rest later.
I think please don't go crazy could be the watchword for today and for the next 4 years. While we're on housing, do Senator Dodd or Christopher, do you have any comments on that project over in Solana, whatever that's called? I don't know where that stands right now. You know what I'm talking about?
It was going to go. They had gotten enough signatures to put it on the ballot, and I think they polled, and certainly I saw or heard about polling on both sides, and it didn't appear that it was going to go anywhere. And so I think the developer rightfully pulled back on the initiative, and he's going to work on a new way of, instead of going around the county or going around the cities, he's going to be working with the city of Rio Vista, and he's going to be working with the county of Solana, which is what he should have done in the first place. But that's his right. I mean, they're property owners there now, and I think as a result of the pushback in the district, it's going to be a better process. Christopher may have a different perspective, perhaps, or add to that.
Yeah, I think we have the same point of view on this. So in the abstract, I think that the idea that given the scale of what we need in terms of housing and affordability, and the scale of solutions that we need to use our energy more efficiently and produce less waste and all of that, in the abstract, the idea of creating experiments, not in a laboratory, but because we're all going to, we might live there, but sort of innovations on the ground that can take advantage of everything that we've learned over the last couple centuries about engineering and solar energy and all of that. Like let's deploy it as though it's brand new, not trying to convert Cotati or Yountville into something totally different, but let's create something totally new. So in the abstract, that I think that it's worthy, and California should be a place that kind of innovation is happening. Now, whether this is the right location for that or the right project, I think that's been the big question. And it is a big question because it's on important agricultural lands. It's the heart of Solano County. It's on a lot of very resource limited and resource constrained areas for water and for habitat and all of that. So all the questions that have been raised are the right ones. And I'm also glad, just like Senator Dodd, that they pulled the ballot measure. It wasn't the way to go. There are way too many questions about this. So personally, I think the state it should be easier to innovate and to experiment. And it shouldn't take 25 years to figure out how to get through a process. And at the same time, there must be a rigorous environmental process when you're proposing to build a city for 400,000 people in the middle of rural anywhere. Don't complain when if somebody says, well, where are you going to get your water and where's the traffic going to go? I mean, those are pretty basic. And so we can do both things. And I think I'm also glad to see them go back to the table. But I do think there's some work we have to do at the state to make sure we don't get in this kind of situation again. And it's both easier to innovate, but also that we get the clarity of environmental and traffic analysis that voters are going to want to have before they make decisions like this.
David,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask the senator-elect a question, and that was more, as you come into this role, big shoes to fill, I might add. What you're thinking about what committees or policy areas you'd like to concentrate on? Where do you think you'd like to serve on which committees or policy areas? We've talked about a lot of things. I thought it might be interesting for folks to hear kind of your thinking about that.
All right, well, hopefully the president pro tem of the Senate's listening too, right?
We're hoping.
Because in the end, we can all have our wishes and desires, but ultimately the president, fortunately, he's a friend and neighbor to Senate District 3. So I think sort of the first one and the boring answer, but the real one is I'd like to serve on the committees where the money is. In the budget committee, the appropriations committee, the committees where, in part because we have a budget challenge, in part because we have so many deep needs, and in part because, as a having been mayor for a long time, I know how important it is that you ask the question, how is this thing going to work? And sometimes in the regular committees, Senator Dodd knows this, but sometimes in the regular committee, you get all caught up in, what a cool idea this would be if it could happen, and so everybody votes for it, but in that particular place, sometimes you lose sight of, okay, but who's going to do it? Like, who's going to pay for it? How will consumers actually do what we say? Or, how's it actually going to play out? So the committees that are like the second level of review, or that have to make sure that the Caltrans and the DMV have the right staffing and the right direction to get the job done, those are really, really important. And so those money committees are a priority for me. And I know Senator Dodd served on at least one of them in his term as well. We obviously have key issues in the natural resources and wildlife area. That's water, some of the wildfire issues that weren't in Senator Dodd's important committee. That's a key one. Education as well. He doesn't like me saying this, but I do like Senator Dodd's committee, which is the ambiguously named governmental organization committee, which is obviously really important in the district for things like, well, you mentioned AI, Rick, but also around emergency response and disaster preparedness, and then very importantly and very brashly, one of the key industries in California and certainly in our district, and that's the wine industry, along with spirits and beer as well, but that industry too. So, I've got my ears on all of it. But I will say one other thing. I learned a long time ago. Governor Schwarzenegger appointed me to the state board that oversees like sewer regulations and pesticide discharges and that sort of thing. And I was a kid mayor, and I'm like, I'm not interested in that. I want to work on exciting things. I wasn't put on this planet to work on sewer and pesticides. I want to stop sprawl and promote educational opportunity. And I quickly realized that that board, because it was controlling sewage and pesticides, was a major determinant of whether land was farm or habitat, whether land was being, housing and built and warehouses on it, or open space. And so I think what that taught me was, whatever committee assignments I end up with, there are tools there to really make a difference on the issues. And sometimes they're ones hidden in plain sight.
Thanks,
Senator Dodd. Thank you, Senator-elect. And we hope to see you around Sonoma. Senator Dodd is a frequent fixture here. And hopefully you will stay that way. I just want to give you the last word since it's our last time together. What do you see in 5 words or less? No, more than that, as your legacy, as your main accomplishments?
Well, I think areas of, in wildfire resilience is going to be seen as something. SB 901, the Wildfire Threat Technology Center that we did at Cal Fire, a number of those bills in that area. And I think also, all the bills, 126 bills and different kinds that I got signed by the governor. I want to be clear here. You don't get stuff like that done unless you have awesome staff. And from the very top, Ezra Shaban, in the Capitol, and his whole team, my GO team, Felipe and his team, and Tom in the district, and all those people. I had people that were high performing people that blew my mind. They come to work every single day, ready to work, and they do it. And I think, I'll have one final comment. I am really excited to see what Christopher can do in District 3. I'm very high on a guy coming in. I can tell you that he has more institutional knowledge than any probably the last 5 or 6 senators had coming in here, and then more. So not to put any pressure on him, but I just feel very, very comfortable and confident he's going to do one hell of a job. But it's been an honor of a lifetime. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Dodd. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you for these number of years. Senator-elect Christopher, we hope that you will continue the tradition. David, thank you so much for being on. Sorry, Lori Wilson didn't make it. Thank you to Elizabeth for calling in, and thanks to all our engineers here. And that's it. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.